Welcome to the Disney Wedding Podcast. This show is brought to you by Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, the only guidebook and bridal organizer tailored exclusively to Disney's fairy tale weddings at Walt Disney World. I'm Carrie Hayward, and each week I feature Disney wedding updates, money-saving tips, and interviews with wedding vendors and real Disney couples. I also cover honeymoons, anniversaries, and engagements at the Disney parks and resorts. Join me now as the Disney Wedding Podcast celebrates romance at Disney destinations. Today on the Disney Wedding Podcast, I am speaking with Disney bride Corinne Egan about her ceremony in Japan at EPCOT after hours with a reception on the French island in EPCOT. I thought you guys would be interested to hear how she chose these locations and how she planned everything and how it all turned out. So welcome, Corinne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show today. I always like to start at the very beginning and find out how you and your fiancé decided that you wanted to have your wedding at Disney.
So it was truly pretty much all me. When I was about 12 years old, I went on a Disney trip with my family. We had like a dinner reservation at the Grand Floridian, and as we were walking in, someone was obviously getting married and being transported from the Grand Floridian to somewhere else. And so outside the front door was like the Cinderella carriage with the horse and like the team of people there. And of course, being a little kid, I asked if I could have the horse. They told me because it was someone's wedding day. And I just remember going to my mom and saying, when I get married, I'm going to get married in Disney World. And so it was just something I always wanted since I was little. And when I met my husband, he was also a big Disney lover. And so we just, over the years, just spent more time with Disney. And so when he proposed to me in Disney World, I asked him, I said, can we get married here? Would you be okay with that? And he was like, absolutely. So it truly was mostly me.
That's wonderful. So then how did your friends and family react when they found out where your wedding was going to be?
Most of my friends and family were totally like, yeah, that's completely you. I couldn't imagine that you would get married anywhere else. So they were all really excited.
How many guests did you invite and how many were able to make the trip?
I invited 25 guests and we had a total of 18.
Did you set up a room block for your guests?
I did. I picked All-Star Music, Pop Century, and Boardwalk.
And how did you choose the day of the week and time of day for your event?
So I always wanted an October wedding. So I really was just kind of happy with any date in October. My parents' wedding anniversary is in October as well. And so is my dad's birthday. So my dad's birthday is October 1st. My mom and dad's wedding anniversary is the 27th. And so I was trying to pick something in between the two, whether it's not too close to either of those dates. And that's how I fell on the 19th of October.
Got it. And I take it the time of day was dictated by wanting Japan after hours?
Correct. Yeah, I didn't get to pick the time. I cared more about where it was. And so the time of day, I was just going to take whatever Disney gave me.
And did you do your reception directly following or did you do it the next day?
I did it directly following. So my wedding ceremony was from 11:30 p.m. to midnight. And then my reception was from midnight to 4 a.m.
Interesting. Okay, great. Now, how did you choose these venues for your ceremony and reception?
Japan Pavilion kind of was this love between me and my husband. We were both really big lovers of like Asian culture. We both really like anime. I'm actually studying to learn Japanese. And so while we knew it was impossible to have a wedding in Japan, this was kind of like the next best thing for us was to like have it in the Japan Pavilion. And then as far as the reception area, that was just more or less like out of the options that were available because I wanted it to follow directly after the ceremony. The one in France was just the most beautiful location in my opinion because I also wanted it to be outdoors.
I see. Okay. Now, did you use any outside vendors for the portions of your event that you were able to?
The outside vendors that I used were for my photo and video as well as my officiant. So my photo and video company is owned by a really good friend of mine called Vive Media. You can find them online, but they are centrally located in the Chicago, Illinois area, but they travel anywhere. And then my officiant also happened to be the owner of the photo video company. He's one of my best friends, and he is an officiant. So he also officiated my wedding. And then for my hair and makeup, I used LeJeune Artistry, which is local to like the Orlando, Florida area. She was just truly amazing to work with. She always answered my phone calls. Her team always answered my emails. I didn't really have anything in mind as far as inspo photos for my hair or makeup. I just basically had a phone conversation with her and told her what I was imagining. And so basically I bought a bunch of fake flowers to put in my hair, and I found hair extensions, and her team just basically created this gorgeous braid. And then same with makeup. I had no idea what I wanted for makeup either. I just said, I want to look like a princess. So I was like, but I don't want to look fake. So do with that what you will. And she basically took my imagination and brought it to life and gave me this beautiful, like Rapunzel inspired braid hair and makeup design. And it truly was just mind-blowingly beautiful. Truly the most beautiful I've ever found in my whole life.
Oh, that's wonderful. Did you have a Rapunzel or Tangled themed event?
I did. So my wedding theme was Tangled inspired.
How else did you incorporate that?
The floral team, they basically created like the Tangled lanterns, and those were the centerpieces for all of my tables. On the sweetheart table that me and my husband sat at, they actually had a gondola that kind of replicates the one in the scene with Rapunzel and Flynn when they're at the Lantern Festival. So that was a centerpiece for our table, and it was filled with flowers. The other outside vendor I used was I bought a custom cake topper from Clark and Dagger. You can find them pretty much anywhere. And they were recommended to me from the Disney Fairy Tale Wedding Facebook page. And I'm so glad that I went to them, because they basically custom designed me a Rapunzel and Flynn in like their gondola as my cake topper for my wedding cake. And so that was on top of my cake. And then I also had the Disney designed Tangled wedding cake where it's got the gold lanterns embellishment and the suns. And on the back of the cake, it says best day ever. And they also had floating lanterns off of the cake as well.
That's fantastic. Did you add any kind of entertainment to the ceremony or to the reception?
I had a DJ. I selected Chris Lytle from the Disney preferred DJ vendor list. He was truly super fun and so cool to work with. Me and my husband have very similar tastes to like the type of music he played. So he was truly just like the best fit for us. A lot of fun, like 90s, 2000s, like EDM dance. So he's like a big Calvin Harris fan, and me and my husband are big EDM fans. So he was a perfect pick for that.
That's great. Do you have any menu items or cake flavors that you would recommend?
One of the cake flavors that I was really surprised was so good was the amaretto almond crunch cake. And then there was like an amaretto like liqueur filling. And both of those were just like fantastic. Like if you're someone that likes the amaretto almond flavors, they were just so delicious. And that was one of the layers in my cake, and I loved it. The menu items I thought was like the most fun part. So Disney, I feel like, doesn't do a really good job explaining how much creativity you have with your food menu. But you have pretty much, if you want it and you want to pay for it, Disney will probably make it happen. So for me, I have a lot of food at Disney that I really enjoy. Like I'm a big fan of the Le Cellier filet mignon. I'm a big fan of the green beans from Steakhouse 71. And so pretty much I just kind of said like what all of my favorite foods were from like all of these different restaurants or places. And every time I talked to my chef, he was like, yeah, I can make this happen. He's like, it's always going to say inspired, but it's probably going to be pretty much exactly like what you have at these restaurants. So a lot of my menu was just favorite foods from different places around Disney.
That's a great idea. Did you add a dessert party or a welcome party around your day?
It did. So the day before my wedding, we had a rehearsal dinner where we invited all of our guests, and we did the Fantasmic dessert party. We were on the small terrace because there was only about 20 of us, and that was super fun. I did create my own menu with that too. I wanted basically build your own sliders is what I did. So I know on the Disney menu or the dessert menu, they offer like slider options, but I really wanted the idea that people could just put what toppings they wanted it versus like being forced to eat whatever one was already pre-built. So I had like build your own sliders. I had chicken, beef, and then for dessert, I'm a really big fan of the fruit sushi that you can get during the Flower and Garden Festival from the Japan Pavilion. So that was my dessert. I had that as like my custom added dessert during my dessert party.
That's great. Can you give my listeners a timeline of how the wedding day all fit together?
So because my wedding was so late at night, majority of my day was spent trying to be as well rested as possible. I would say that my bridesmaids and my mother showed up at my hotel room at the boardwalk somewhere around 3 p.m. We had like a late lunch. My hair and makeup team showed up around 5. They got me ready. I was in my dress by like 8:30, and then from about 8:30 till about 9:45, I spent time like taking photos around the boardwalk area, out by the water, around the hotel. The limo service picked us up shortly before 10:30. We were driven to the back of EPCOT, where we sat there for probably about 15 to 20 minutes before they got the official all clear that we could go in. I met my day of coordinator that night and was walked to my ceremony area where I was hidden kind of behind like the stairway to the Hibachi Japan restaurant. Because the most interesting thing, right, is me and my husband didn't see each other. We did kind of traditional. We didn't do like a sneak first look or anything like that. We truly said goodnight to each other the night before. We stayed at 2 separate hotels. And so we had no idea what each other was going to look like. And so hiding me in the Japan Pavilion's kind of hard because there's a lot of open spaces there. But the team definitely got creative in hiding me in this little corner pocket behind the stairway. My ceremony was gorgeous, beautiful. From there, photos and videos were taken. I was then escorted over to the reception area. And from there, the rest of the night was food, drinks, entertainment, and then bus service stayed until 4 a.m. and then took us all back to our hotels.
Now, I know sometimes people are wary of having an after-hours ceremony followed by a reception because they're worried that their guests will be too tired. How did that go for you?
Most of my guests were around my age, so I'm in my mid-30s. I did have a handful of guests that were older, like around my parents' age. I honestly told people that the bus will allow you to leave at the top of every hour if you would like to take you back to your hotel. And pretty much everyone laughed at me and said, there's no way we're leaving a Disney wedding early. So no one wanted to, even though I gave them the option to.
That's great. So out of all of this, what ended up being your favorite memory of your wedding day?
It was probably my ceremony, walking down the aisle, and my husband just cried pretty much the entire time. My husband is a crier in general. And so I don't even remember our vows. I don't even remember anything that was said during our wedding because all I could see was him crying and constantly mouthing to me how beautiful I was and how much he loved me and how lucky he was. And all I kept saying was that I love you too and to stop crying so that I didn't ruin my makeup. And so a lot of our wedding photos is just me laughing and him crying at our ceremony.
When you guys were planning, what were some of the most important aspects of the event where you focused your attention or your budget?
So I had like hardcore ones, like the Japan Pavilion was something I really didn't want to give up. I really wanted a ride mix in, which I did after my dessert party at my rehearsal dinner. And the reason for that was because I wanted a ride photo where I had everybody, right? Because I only had 18 guests plus me and my husband. There was only 20 of us. So it was like the perfect number of seats because Tower of Terror can fit 22 people. So it was literally like the perfect number of seats to have one giant photo of my entire wedding guests and wedding party and my parents. And it's by far like my most exciting memento from my wedding experience. So it was the Ride Mix-In, Japan Pavilion, and the other one was picking a Saturday in October. So the date was most important to me. I just really wanted an October wedding.
Got it. Were there any aspects that were less important where you saved your money or just your effort?
Yeah, so talking about that story when I was a little girl and seeing Cinderella's carriage, right? Obviously, I looked into what that would cost. And as much as like my little girl dreams was telling me I needed it, I couldn't justify the cost of something that only lasts like 15 minutes. And for me, that was some of the things I cut out. I made some changes on food that I didn't initially make. I made some changes on my bar package that was interesting because I don't think a lot of people know this because Disney doesn't really advertise it, but they have a liquor license and cutoff time, and that's 2 a.m. So if you have a reception that follows a late night wedding, you actually can only have bar drinks, alcoholic beverages, until 2 a.m. and then their license ends. But you can have like soda and things like that afterwards. So that was another interesting thing because I still have to pay for obviously those 2 hours, and it made more sense to pay for the package versus paying for what Disney calls like per drink, because I may have had to pay more money the other way.
Now, did anything go wrong or just not turn out like you expected?
Unfortunately, a lot went wrong. I did have an amazing day of coordinator that this poor woman who I now cannot remember her name and I feel terrible for it. I'm pretty sure if she didn't quit after my wedding, I would be shocked. So essentially, handful of things that went wrong. After my reception, we were escorted over to the reception area, and my day of coordinator would not let me or my husband enter our reception area. She kept like stalling us, but she didn't really explain why. And looking back on it, right, she was doing her job. She was trying to make sure that we stayed calm, we stayed happy. So she lied to make sure that I continued to have a good experience. But what happened was the sprinkler system went off and destroyed all of my tables. The decor, the flowers, the centerpieces, the tablecloths, you name it, everything was soaked. So they spent 45 minutes stripping everything down, putting it back. Oh, and the other thing is they got my DJ's equipment wet too. So then he was having technical difficulties because his equipment got wet. So 45 minutes later, they got it all fixed, got everyone out there. The downside though is in that 45 minutes that dinner wasn't served. Dinner was taken off of the hot trays and got cold. So everyone's dinner was served cold on top of that. So obviously after I got in there, my mother pulled me aside and she was like, hey, so the reason why you weren't allowed in here is because the sprinkler system went off and your DJ's equipment got wet and this and this. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like, it's okay. Like everyone seems fine. Like we're okay. And we're in the middle of dinner service and one of my guests comes up to me and he goes, hey, I need to talk to you about a situation that happened on the bus on the way over here. So I guess what happened was the best man brought a bottle of tequila onto the bus. Now, I do know that that's not okay. Disney's not cool with it. But the third-party company that they use for the buses, if you do a charter bus, is actually Mears. So it's actually a Mears bus driver and a Mears bus coordinator, and it's a Mears bus. Disney just partners with them. So I guess my best man got away with bringing the bottle of tequila, and they were passing out shots again when there's only 18 people. And there was actually less of that on the bus because 4 of them were with me getting ready for the wedding. So there was like 15 people on the bus. The best man was passing out drinks, and the bus coordinator took a shot out of the best man's hand and did a shot in front of everybody. Yeah. And if that wasn't worse enough, after she did the shot, I guess she started telling everyone that they were terrible people if they didn't vote for a certain party for the upcoming election. I'm not going to put out what party because that's not really the point. But really made it adamant of saying, like, you're an unintelligent individual, which much more foul language if you voted for this person instead of this person. And then after they arrived and my guests were getting off this crazy bus ride that they had just witnessed, she proceeded to tell all of my guests to make sure they bring her back a vodka soda or she wouldn't allow them to get back on. And then the final detail that I didn't find out until almost 4 days after my wedding is she attempted to kiss my husband.
What?
So I say all this to say the only part I actively knew was the drinking part. And then when I told my day of coordinator, my mother took over talking to the day of coordinator. My husband went over, told her the rest of it. And then for probably the next 45 minutes, a select handful of my guests went over, had to give statements to my day of coordinator and her assistant. And I basically, after hearing all this, I said, listen, I don't really care what you got to do. I said, I just ask for this woman to not be on the bus when I leave my wedding. And so they did make that happen. And that's what I am most grateful for, that I never had to see this person. But that was not fun to deal with. And then the other big thing that happened was during my father-daughter dance with my dad, the sprinkler system went off a second time and proceeded to get everything wet, including my guests. And my mother stood in front of my wedding cake so it wouldn't get wet, drenching herself to save my cake. So when I tell you that you could spend thousands of dollars on a Disney wedding and you could make sure that all the right people that are supposed to know when sprinkler systems should be turned off, or the other thing that happened was they forgot to turn off the background theme park music for my ceremony and my reception. So the whole night there was just blaring theme park background music. I couldn't hear my harpist at all during my ceremony. That was the other bummer thing. So looking back on it, I laugh now because I'm just like, well, at least it went wrong for someone I'm a very chill person. So like I wasn't mad. I wasn't upset. I think actually my guests and my husband and my mother were more mad than I was. And I remember the Monday after my wedding, the director of Disney weddings gave me a call, and he was like, first and foremost, I just want to apologize. In my like 10 plus years of doing this, he's like, I've never had these things happen, at least not this many. He's like, what I can promise you is that Disney has been assured by mirrors that this woman will never work a Disney contract ever again. So I can at least say that with confidence that at least no future bride or groom will have to ever fear that this person may end up on their charter bus. Disney was incredibly apologetic over the sprinkler system. They did not understand how that could be so overmissed, because I guess there is a very clear set of information that's sent to a variety of teams in the theme park so that they know this, so that they don't turn those things on, or they ensure that they turn off. And it was met with a very thoughtful, substantial refund for compensation for the fact that all of these things caused a lot of delays, my food being cold and things like that. And then as just like an extra, like, we're sorry, they offered to give me and my husband like a next trip free on them for like a week, and we can stay at any resort. So while it wasn't my goal to get anything out of it, it was nice that they at least offered to do what they could to make up for me for it.
Wow. Okay. So was there anything that seemed like a big deal beforehand and turned out not to be a big deal?
Yeah, I think looking back on it, when I said I couldn't hear my harpist play, I spent so much time picking out like entrance songs and things like that. And I don't even know if I could have heard it, I would have heard it. I was so zoned in on just staring at my husband, listening to the things that he was saying to me. Like, I don't even remember anything my officiant said. So my best advice is to, if you're somebody that stresses over what song to walk down the aisle to, or what song should your bridal party walk in on, you probably are not going to care about it in the moment or even hear it. And so I stressed about that so hard. And like looking back on it now, I don't even know why I stressed so hard about it.
Interesting. Okay, great. And then is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
I think I would have split my reception and my wedding ceremony instead of it being back to back. Not because of like the issues that happened or because of how late it was, but I think I would have picked another type of vibe in the sense of that the dessert party was super fun at Fantasmic, and I almost wish I had scheduled like a second dessert party for like the following day, but at EPCOT, right? And been able to walk through EPCOT with my wedding guests to a private reception, like during park hours. I think that would have been just as fun, if not more fun.
Got it. Okay. So do you have any tips or advice for future Disney couples?
One of the things I was really worried about was the marriage license part. And honestly, your podcast is how I learned how to do the mail away marriage license. And so the people at that county, they were incredible. Every time I called and asked like a crazy, obscene question, I was met with like the kindest people ever. And I'm sure all they do is get crazy brides that ask 1,000,001 questions that are doing this exact thing. But they were always so kind. And so I'm that person that always overthinks and asks too many questions. And so if you're somebody that fears doing that or like burdening a business or being an inconvenience, they were the sweetest people. I also felt the same way with my wedding planner. Truly, like if I needed another call just to like clear my head or talk about an idea with her, she always made time to schedule that call with me. So don't hesitate on wanting to ask for that call. I know some people, again, have that concept of not feeling like an inconvenience or a burden or like, but you're going to spend all this money and you're trying to make a dream of yours come true. Definitely lean on all of these people who are there to help make it happen.
That's great advice. Well, Corinne, I think you've offered a lot of great tips and advice for anyone who's interested in getting married or having a vow renewal at Walt Disney World, and I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to tell my story.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Carrie Hayward, inviting you to join me again next week for another episode of the Disney Wedding Podcast. Past shows and tons of photos for each episode are available on my website, DisneyWeddingPodcast.com, or listen in your favorite podcast app. And for instant answers to all your Walt Disney World wedding questions, check out Carrie Hayward's Fairy Tale Weddings Guide, available as an interactive ebook with continual free updates at fairytaleweddingsguide.com.